Hi, this is the video for Thursday, November 4th, for those of you who were not in class, either because you were helping me with something or because you were not there. And I'm doing the video, I haven't done them in a while, but it's an important moment to stop because we are doing a new unit. And by the way, you can always request these videos for me. I do them when I can, and I will absolutely do them if somebody specifically needs them. So our new unit is called The Crucible and New England. And so today in class, we started by thinking about morality and religion because that is really the basic understanding that you need to have before you move into The Crucible. The Crucible is a play with a weird name that's all about a group of Puritans who lived in New England in the 1600s. So, in order to really understand what guided them, we want you to think about some of these big questions about religion and law. For that, I'd like you to click on 3 here, this survey, and do this on your own time. It'll take you like 5 minutes. I'm asking you to look at statements and then decide where do you fall on the spectrum of that answer. For example, morality comes from the law. Do you really disagree with that? Do you really agree? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Religion is good for society. Do you kind of not feel anything about that? Do you really disagree? Do you really agree? It's impossible to be too honest. Adultery is never acceptable. All of these questions are rooted in morality, systems of morality, and they show up in our play, which is going to be very interested in these questions. So we talked about this for a while. We had some good discussion about what people felt and thought anonymously. And that's what you will do for your writing assignment, no STEM. And then I presented on the Puritans. Who are the Puritans? So I'm going to do that for you now, quick as I can, and get you that video so that you have some basic knowledge before we move into the unit. So we're calling the unit Hopeful Journeys, Pilgrims, and Puritans. This word Exodus, I'll talk about that a little bit as well. Basically, the documentary, you won't get to see it on the video because it doesn't work with Screencast-O-Matic, but it's really good and it's all about early America and the way that it was settled. Basically, though, the central concepts that we wanted you to understand at first is that America is a place that's defined by the freedom to believe and to be free from belief. So America is, in its founding documents, a nation that is premised upon separating religion from the government. It was not always that way, though. For most of history, a powerful government and religious beliefs were together. It was hard to be in charge if you didn't also oversee religious ceremonies and thought. And America is a new place in this way. There are other empires that had a freedom of religion that they allowed for their conquered peoples, the Roman Empire, the Mongol Empire. They too allowed for the conquered peoples to practice religions that they wanted to. So it's not that America is completely new, but in those places, those empires, it wasn't codified into the set of documents that founded the places themselves. In this way, America is a new place, or as we see in the documentary, it has the new Adam, because so many of those early groups coming over to colonize America were Christian. All of that said, America is the most religiously diverse nation on earth. There is no national religion. The freedom to worship is a central principle in the national creed, and the founders, though they practiced Christianity themselves, really deliberately separated church and state from each other. Nevertheless, religion is intimately connected to everything that happened in our country's history. It's just really hard to separate religion out from a people. So that's kind of the first concept, and the second concept is this concept of the Exodus. So the story of America is an Exodus story, and that is a theme and a term that they would have used in those early days in the 1600s coming over because they so strongly identified with the Exodus, which is the story of the Old Testament biblical story of Moses bringing his people out of slavery in Egypt under the Pharaoh into their promised land. that story, that narrative becomes something that's important in America all the way through. From those very first groups, the Puritans and the Pilgrims, saying, we need a new place. We don't want to be oppressed, to the groups of people who throughout America's history have also sought that same liberty. So it's an ever-expanding definition of who is free in this country, in this new place. And this, too, is what makes America unique. Those other empires I mentioned might have practiced religious tolerance, but they were allowing these conquered peoples to have religious freedom. America is a place that was defined by moving out of some other oppressive regime into freedom, a new space, a space they could make all their own. So that adventurous spirit, that movement, this journey that we keep talking about is central here as well. All right, so there's two groups in particular we're interested in today. I'm going to skip past some of this pretty quick. The Pilgrims are the first, and this is familiar maybe from like elementary school. The Mayflower was the ship that brought the first Pilgrim community across the Atlantic to New England. Now, notice on the ship, there's families. There's these kids and women here. The Mayflower was not like the ships that were bringing John Smith and the merchants to Virginia. Those men, mostly men, were seeking profit. They were seeking gain to bring back to their investors. This, though, the Mayflower, is bringing people who are seeking a new home. They have no real capital interests in America. They just want the empty space so they can make their own religious government, a new theocracy. They actually were trying to go to Virginia. They got lost, really lost, and ended up in New England, which is Massachusetts. And I'll show you a map in a second. But think about this as the same time. Like, think about ships in London leaving at the same time, and some are going to Massachusetts for these English communities that will become the Puritan and Pilgrim communities. Some are going to the south. They're going to Virginia to try to find gold. It's the same type of time. And the Puritans come only 10 years after. So we're going to call this all like the mid-1600s. The Pilgrims left England because they wanted a more intense religious community. They thought the Church of England was not holy enough. The Pilgrims believed that they were the elect, like they were going to heaven, and others weren't, but they had to stay really in line to keep up that vow and that path to heaven. So they emphasized simple living, plain living, obedience to God and the Bible. And they set up a theocracy so they can make those things happen. So you have the Pilgrims. And then you have the Puritans, which are really just another group of pilgrims, but they identified as a more strict, more pure sect of the Protestant church. They also thought the Church of England was not holy enough, and they also landed in Massachusetts around the same time, but they had a little bit more intensity, more judgment baked into their thinking. John Winthrop here is their governor, and we will read a thing from him next week. He is also the star of the documentary we watched from PBS. This guy, I'll show you in a second, who this is not John Winthrop. This is the actor who plays John Winthrop. This video is really good. You can click on it if you want to see it yourself. I can't show you this on the Screencast-O-Matic software, unfortunately. But he is the one who really thought this is going to be a great community, us Puritans. Like, we're going to change the world, and everyone is watching us. Whereas the Pilgrims were kind of more to themselves. And I put it more simply in this slideshow than it probably was, but I'm trying to make a good, clean argument. Because the number of Pilgrims in New England was much smaller than the number of Puritans who kept coming over from England, Puritan ideas and perspective dominated. So the Puritans believed they had God-given superiority. They had a really high expectation of personal behavior, conformity to the norm. The Pilgrims were more forgiving, more accommodating, more welcoming. Both of those narratives are available still in this history. Like, they continue their lineage all the way through to today. But the Puritans and that culture, that ethos of superiority and judgment, they carried the day. And why does all this matter for us? Why am I giving this presentation in English class? Well, you have to understand this stuff if we are going to understand our play, The Crucible. So Hope you enjoy, and we'll talk more about it next week.